Okay, in this lesson, guys, we're going to be looking at selection. So the key to this is learning how to use some of the tools that have led to things like generative AI. So you'll be able to use a lot of the tools in Photoshop that do a great job, but just understanding how we got there is important. So we're going to be learning a couple tools that are kind of older, not used all that often now that Photoshop has gotten as advanced as it is, but we just want to have a sense of how we can kind of refine some of those selections and some of the tools available to us. Okay, so first of all, just go and grab the image. Okay, you're going to go to section 4.3 and you're going to go find the PSD, which is here. When you click on it, it's going to take you to this. Make sure you don't use this image here. You want to actually go and download the PSD. Okay, when you click on this, it's going to go download the file. It's going to get saved to your downloads. Okay, open that up. In your downloads folder, you want to have this guy here. It's called Start01. You may want to rename it to melonman like that. Okay, we're going to open up that in Photoshop, and here we go. To zoom in, it's about this size. You're going to hit Command-0 to fill your whole screen. First thing we're going to do is just take a quick look at some selection tools. So these are pretty traditional selection tools. You've got the rectangular marquee, elliptical marquee, single row marquee in both horizontal and vertical. Okay, and these do exactly what you expect. You can make a selection, and it's going to select an area on your screen. Same thing if you are using elliptical marquee. Okay, that's going to make a elliptical marquee. You have a couple things here. Actually, I should have reset my settings here since that's a normal. So if I want to make a perfect circle, I'm going to hold Shift. Okay, same thing if I wanted to hold Shift on a rectangle, it'll make it a. Oops, hold on, let me just change that back to normal. Okay, it'll make it a perfect square if I hold Shift while making my selection. A couple things, if I have a selection made and I click outside of it, it'll get rid of my selection. I can also hit Command D, which you can also find here under Select, Deselect. Command D is a shortcut for that, okay? And so that will deselect your selection, okay? You can do that with any of the marquee. So if I have a selection like this and then I change to another one, click outside of it, it's going to get rid of that. Now with the single row marquee, if I click and then click again, it actually makes a new marquee, okay, a new single line or single column marquee. Okay, so that's how that works. The next one down we're going to take a quick look at is the lasso tool. There are a couple variations on this. Lasso tool is basically for drawing a selection, and wherever you click and then when you let go, it'll close your selection for you. Okay, so that's how that works. The next one down is going to be polygonal lasso. It works much like the pen tool in Illustrator. It just makes straight lines between points where you click, okay, and it makes your selection. Okay, all of these have, in addition to the basic tool, you also have some settings here. Okay, so here we've got just the plain new selection. So I make a new selection, it'll get rid of my old one and create a new selection. If I click this next option here, it's called Add Selection. When I select that, if I start clicking, you'll see that it keeps the old selection, and now I've got two things selected. Okay, so if I've now got this selection here, let's say I want to, add to my selection. I'm going to add this here. Okay, there I've now added to my selection, and whatever is selected is what would get picked up and moved depending on what we're doing. Okay, I'm going to Command D and deselect. All I'm doing when I select an area is I'm telling Photoshop, hey Photoshop, this is the part of this image that I care about. Okay, so if I'm filling and I go Edit, fill, it's going to fill that area with whatever color I select, okay, white in this case, or if I'm moving it, okay, I'm going to pick it up and move that part because that's the part I care about. Okay, Command D, deselect. All right, so that's the basics of this tool. There's also a subtract. So if I have, say, I make a selection like this and I'm trying to be careful and get this gray area and I go a little too far in these two directions, I can go to the subtractive and just subtract that part of the selection and that part of the selection. I went a little too far. I go back to the additive and I can then either add to my selection in this way, which is probably not the way I would do this, or I can add to my selection by making a new selection over here, which now means I have these two elements selected. You can also combine by going to the elliptic marquee, adding to that, and now I can set my selection wherever I want. Okay, notice while I have not let go of my mouse here, I can hold the space bar and realign the registration point. Okay, so that is just the space bar will pick up and move your registration point, and when you let go of the space bar, you can then again resize your selection. Okay, select, deselect. Okay, so that's the basics of these tools. Now what we're going to be using instead in this instance is we're going to be using a combination of tools, but the one we're going to use right now is here. It's called the object selection tool, okay, which is the first one in this list here, okay, object selection tool. So what happens with this is, because I've only got one layer, I come over here and I just put my cursor over whatever I want to select, and it does a reasonable job of selecting that. I'm going to click here, it's going to think about it, okay, and there is my selection, okay, it's now selected the melon. I'm going to copy, Command C, or edit, copy, and edit, paste, and that is going to drop this onto a new layer, okay? So if I turn this layer off, you'll see that the melon has now been put on its own layer over here, move tool, okay, and there's this guy, okay, put that back. I'm going to turn this guy back on so we have everything as it was. I'm going to double click and rename this layer. Be careful to double click the actual word layer and not the area here, the blank area. If I click this or double click this, it's going to open up my layer style properties, which I don't want. Okay, I want to double click the word and I can rename that melon. Okay, next I'm going to zoom in by hitting Z on my keyboard or selecting my magnifying glass. Right now, if you have scrubby zoom turned on, you can actually just drag to the right or drag to the left and it will zoom in or out. If you have scrubby zoom turned off, you would just click in the area, or you can draw a selection around the part that you want zoomed in. Okay, to zoom back out, I'm going to hold Option, okay, which is going to change from a zoom in to a zoom out. And now I'm zoomed out. Okay, I'm going to hold the space bar, which gives me the hand tool. Okay, I'm just going to realign so I can see both the blueberry and the carrot. What I want to do is I want to take my marquee or my elliptical marquee selection tool, and I'm going to select this blueberry, and I'm going to copy and paste it onto its own layer and put it in front of the carrot. So I'm going to make a selection. I've got to resize it, so I'm going to hold spacebar to get the registration point right, resize it until I'm not getting any of those like whitish pixels. I only want kind of those bluish pixels. Okay, that looks good about there. Now, if I just move this, notice what happens is, because this is on, we're going to be on the background layer here. If I did it here, nothing would happen because there is nothing on that layer. Okay, I need to be on this layer. And if I want to move this, notice what happens. It's going to leave whatever my background color is. Right now, my background color is black. So when I go to move this, it just leaves black pixels there. Command Z to undo. What I want to do instead is I don't want to change this image. I want to copy it and move it to its own layer. Okay, so I'm going to Command C, Command V. It's going to put a new layer here, which is going to have just the blueberry that I pasted on it. Okay, I'm going to double click this and call that berry. Okay, I'm going to move that berry in front of the carrot. Okay, I can also use my arrow keys on my keyboard, okay, to move around while I've got the move tool selected in my toolbar. Okay, happy with that positioning. I now want to take this carrot and I'm going to make a selection around the carrot about there, holding the space bar to reposition and then resizing. Okay, and I want to, from the background layer that has the carrot on it, because notice that this berry is only on this layer. So when I copy, because this is my active layer, copy and paste, it's going to put what was on that layer here, which was just the carrot, onto this layer. I'm going to double click this and call that carrot. Okay, so we've got the berry and the carrot. Now we've got these on two separate layers. What I'm going to demonstrate now is how to take these two separate elements. Okay, that's the carrot and that's the berry. These are two separate elements. I'm going to copy them and I'm going to paste them onto their own layer as one element. So to select anything on a layer. So right now, if I go back into Command 0 and turn on these layers, if I click in this area on the thumbnail, okay, while holding the Command key on my keyboard, notice that the thumbnail or the cursor changes from just the selection to select the layer to it selects any pixels on that layer. So if I click this, it's actually going to select, because the melon has these pixels, it selects this area. If I click deselect that, Command D, if I click here and I hold Command and click this layer, it's going to select just the blueberry, okay, just the pixels that are on that layer. Now, what I'm going to do instead, Command D, I want to select the carrot, because what I want to do is have the entire area around that carrot and that blueberry. So holding Command, click on carrot. I've now selected around the carrot. What I want to do is go above these two layers up to the berry here, and I'm going to say edit, copy, merged. What that's going to do is it's going to copy both of the elements on this layer, or these two layers, as if they were one. okay? If I only copied from the carrot layer, it would just copy and paste the carrot. If I only copied and pasted from the berry layer, it would only paste that element. But because I say edit, copy merged, it's going to copy both elements. And when I paste edit, I'm going to actually turn off my layer so you can see this. Edit, paste, it's going to create a new layer, and that layer is going to have both elements, okay? Both elements as a single entity. So notice that the blueberry is flattened. There is no, the pixels that were behind the blueberry that made that carrot, those are gone now, and that is a flat version of what you saw there, okay? Almost like a photo of that. All right, let's bring all this back. All right, we're going to move this. I'm going to double click this layer and call it eye, and we're going to drag this eye over here and put it on our melon. I want to make a duplicate of that. I'm going to hold Option on my keyboard while I have my move tool selected. I hold Option. It changes my cursor from just the move tool to the copy tool, and I'm going to duplicate that second eye. All right, so now we have two copies of eye. We're going to take these two layers. Now notice I can select the layer, okay, and by clicking on layers. I can also hold Shift on my keyboard and select another layer. And now I've selected two layers, and they are now moving together because I have both elements selected. Okay, if I hold Shift again, I can add melon. Oops, I have to hold. So what happens if I hold Shift? It'll select the first and the anything between the first and the last thing I click. So if I click berry, it's going to click and select all of these. If I want to select individuals, okay, I can click away from that. If I hold Command, it'll add to my selection. Okay, I'm holding Command on my keyboard. I can add to or change my, I want to pick up these here and not that. Okay, and when I move it, it's going to just pick up these three layers. Okay, and what I'm seeing back here is back here on this layer. Okay, all right, Command Z, I'm going to put that back where it was. There. Okay, so here we are. We've got the eye. Okay, eye copy, which we'll call that is the left side of the face. While looking at it, I'll call this eye right side. And we're going to take these two and we're going to put them into a group by selecting the two of them. Okay, again, that was click, hold Shift, click here. I'm going to drag both layers into a folder. Okay, and now I've got a folder here which has both of those elements in it. Okay, I can call that face, and we'll put all the facial elements into there. The next piece we're going to do is we're going to move this yellow pear tomato. Okay, and to do that, we're going to use another selection tool. Okay, it's called the Magic Wand tool. Now, the Magic Wand tool has got something called a tolerance. A tolerance tells me how close do I want to be? How much leeway do I need? So with this tool, if I click anywhere, I'm going to go to the background layer here where this pair exists. And if I click here on this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit to show you what we're looking at. So Z on my keyboard. Oops. Okay. Turn that scroll back on. Okay, if I go back to this Magic Wand tool and I click here in this kind of light highlight area, you'll notice it selects only a few pixels because I've got a tolerance set quite low at 8. Let's bump that up to 16. Okay, I'm going to select, deselect, and do the same thing. And this time I get a little bit of a larger selection. I'm going to bump that up to 32. Select, deselect, and I'm going to again click here. I get slightly larger. Okay, and so what's happening each time I do that, okay, I'm getting a little bit more of a selection depending on where I click. Okay, if I click here, it'll choose the sort of with that tolerance of 32, the pixels that are close to that. If I click here, notice that this this kind of darker color gives me a larger selection because there's not as much variance in color from here to those edges. Okay, so here where the color changes quite drastically between here and here, okay, it gives me a smaller selection. If I went over kind of to this area, it gives me a little bit of a wider selection, but it doesn't include that, right? Because that is too far away based on my tolerance. Okay, select, deselect. I'm going to bump this up to Magic Wand tool. Let's take that to, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe 128. Okay, and I'm going to click here. All right, and that does a halfway decent job. That might be too high. It was a little bit outside of what I want. Okay, so I'm going to Command D. I'm going to take that down to, I don't know, I'm guessing here. What did I do? Let's try 64. Okay, so that gives me a decent selection, but I need a bit more. Again, we can add to our selection by holding shift, just like previously. I hold shift, it's going to add to my selection until I'm pretty happy with my selection. And now I've got this pair pretty well selected. Command 0 to see the entire thing. I'm going to edit, copy, edit, paste, and it's going to paste that onto its own layer, which I'm going to double click and call nose. I'm going to drag the nose up into the face area. Okay, and that is now here. I should move this into position, put on my move tool, and move this pair into position right there. Sorry, this tomato into position. Okay, and that is our facial elements. Next, we're going to take another tool, which again, I don't use all that often, but just to know how it works, underneath this lasso tool, we've got a magnetic lasso tool. Okay, a magnetic lasso tool will snap to an edge. It'll try its best to grab a high contrast edge. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to follow along the inner edge of this grapefruit. Okay, so like ignoring the rind here, I'm just going to kind of drag along that. So remembering where my elements are, this is on the background. I'm going to go back to my background, I'm going to click, and you have to kind of move kind of in a smooth motion in the area that you want. So I'm going to click once and then sort of drag along, and it does its best job of trying, I'm going to click again there, trying to kind of follow along and make a decent selection of that grapefruit there. Okay. Again, I want to copy, Command C, Command V. Okay, I'm going to move this piece of grapefruit over to here. I'm going to double click this and call it ear. I'm going to drop the whole thing here into my face. I'm going to drag it into position. What I want to actually do is rotate it. So a couple ways to do that. I can go to edit and I can go to transform and rotate, okay, which will give me this blue box, which is called the gizmo or a transform gizmo. Okay, I can rotate that like that, or I'm going to hit escape to get rid of this. I can also go edit. Instead of going to transform and scale, rotate, I can go just to free transform, and free transform gives me kind of all of the controls. So this is a bit redundant. You don't really need these because you can do the same thing here if you know the keyboard shortcut, which is Command T. So Command T, there's my gizmo. I can now rotate. I can also scale, and if I hold Shift, I can actually kind of squish this in various directions. Okay, if I hit escape, it'll put it back to where it was and get rid of any transformations that I've added. Okay, if I want to apply that transformation, Command T, I'm going to rotate this into position. Okay, now notice while I'm rotating, it's just moving, 1 degree at a time. But if I hold Shift, okay, you'll notice that it snaps in 15-degree increments. Okay, and so if I'm trying to be really specific and I want this to be exactly 90 degrees, if I hold Shift, it'll snap it to 90 degrees. Okay, I'm going to put this here, and I'm actually just going to scale it down just a little bit. Now notice that it is scaling it in proportion. It's not letting it squish. If I hold Shift, however, it will change. Okay, so just be aware of that. I'm going to bring that down to about this size, position it where I want it, and I'm going to go OK. Either I can hit this checkbox at the top, or I can hit Enter on my keyboard, or I can double click in this area. All of those will do the same thing, which is apply the transformation. Okay, now I want to get rid of, that's a very straight edge there. I want to get rid of kind of the straight part of that by using the curve of this melon. So I'm going to align this. I'm going to turn my opacity down a little bit just so I can see what I'm doing. And I want to have that aligned just about there. I'm going to use my key on my keyboard, the arrows on my keyboard, to get that where I want it, which is about there. Bring this back up to 100%. And then I'm going to use that tool again, that trick again, where I went Command, and I'm going to click on the melon. That's going to select the melon, and I'm going to use that selection to delete what's on the ear layer in this area. So if I now just hit delete on my keyboard, it'll delete those pixels that I selected from the ear. Okay, I'm going to hold Command D to deselect it, and then you can use my keyboard arrow just to move over to show you that that has now been cut out. Okay, by using the curve from the melon, I've now cut that away from this ear. Okay, using my arrow keys again, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to put that back in position. I'm going to duplicate this. A couple ways to do it. I can right click and I can duplicate the layer. I can copy paste, Command C, Command V, or I can drag the whole layer down to this little plus icon here, and it's going to duplicate the layer. I'm going to move it over to here, and I'm going to transform it by going Edit, Transform, and I'm going to flip So flip, horizontal, and vertical do exactly what you think they do. Okay, that is a horizontal flip. So I'm going to drag it over and then use my arrow keys to align that right there. All right, there are our ears. We now want to cut this out. I'm gonna show you a way to do that. Maybe not the way we would typically do it, but just as you can learn some new tools. Okay, I'm gonna make a rectangle. I'm gonna make a selection around this here. Okay, and I've obviously picked up. I'm going back to my background here. I've obviously picked up more than I want. If I move that, I'm gonna actually, of course, move the entire white area around that. I don't want that. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to my magic wand tool. I'm going to set my tolerance quite low. I'm going to make it, let's say, 8. And if you remember, I can use this subtractive, okay, this subtractive selection to get rid of something. Well, by using this tool and saying subtract, I can click here on the white area and it'll subtract all of the white pixels from that box. Let me do that again. Okay, I've got a selection that I made, which is just a rectangle, okay, which is just here. And I'm going to actually purposely this time, I'm going to select more just to show you what it's doing. I've selected all of this, including the grapefruit, including this kind of gray box and this yellow, okay? I'm going to use the magic wand tool to select the white pixels, okay? Now I'm using, if I just did this, it would just select white pixel, which is in everything. I don't want that. I'm going to undo that. I want to subtract the white pixels from my current selection. So if I click here, it will subtract all the white pixels, leaving this and that and that and that, because I have quite a low tolerance, okay? Now I don't actually want that, so I'm gonna go back, make a new selection. Okay, I don't want any of this stuff. I only want this piece right here, and then I'm gonna use the magic wand tool, tolerance set quite low. I'm gonna subtract the white from my selection, leaving with just this bunch of beets or radishes, I think. Okay, I'm going to edit, making sure I'm on my background layer. I'm going to edit copy, and I'm going to edit paste. And I'm going to move this guy into position. Oops, he's on the wrong layer. I'm going to bring him way up here into face. Okay, and then if I need to, I can zoom in and just sort of clean this up. I think I could have got a little closer in there. So I'm going to grab that, click on here and select white. Okay, and on this layer, I'm going to go select similar, and it's going to pick up all the other white pixels or similar to those white pixels, which I can then delete. Okay, and that'll get rid of any excess. I've got rid of a little bit of that, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to add these, go back 2 steps. I'm going to remove this from my selection by holding, I've got my selection tool, wrap marquee tool. I'm just going to go subtract and remove that from my selection and remove that from my selection. And then when I hit delete, it's just going to get rid of all this excess around the edge here. Delete. Command D to deselect, right? And Command 0 to zoom to 100%. There's my eyebrow. I'm going to duplicate it by just eyebrow. Okay, oops. Okay, I'm going to duplicate it by, I think Command J will duplicate it as well. Yes, Command J will duplicate your layer. I'm going to move that over, edit, transform, flip horizontal, right, and there's my second eyebrow. Next, I'm going to grab this mushroom. Okay, a couple ways to do this. You can do really any of the tools that you want. In this case, maybe a combination. Let's see if I use the, let's try the quick selection tool. We haven't looked at that yet. Okay, so the way that works is I'm going to bring my brush down in size to maybe 20, like that. Okay, and then I'm just going to click and drag through the area that I want to select, and it'll do a pretty good job of trying to select. Oops, maybe not. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. Hold on. We'll go back down to background here. Try that again. And there I've done this quick selection, and it does a pretty good job of grabbing what has a contrast difference between these edges. Okay, Command D. Again, it's just this tool here. Okay, it's called the quick selection tool. I've got my brush size down to 20 here, and I just making sure that you're on the right layer. Click and drag through the mushroom and get as close to those edges as you want. And there's our mushroom. Okay, I'm going to Command C, Command V, that goes onto its own layer. That's going to go up here into the face. And I'm going to move that hat up on top of his head. Okay, we're going to call that mushroom. Okay, and that probably shouldn't actually be in the face, so I'm going to drag it outside of the face layer by just dragging it above the word face. Notice that this is all the facial elements, and this probably shouldn't be because it's not really a facial element per se. Last thing we're gonna do is gonna make this kiwi, which I'm just gonna use an elliptical marquee tool and drag a selection, hold spacebar to realign. And I'm gonna copy from the background, copy, go into my face layer here, paste, and V on my keyboard to move. And there is my melon man. I can now save this file. Okay, I'm gonna go file, save as, okay, and it'll save all of the details here. You can also, if you want to, if you're going to edit this for your website, you can crop it. Okay, so let's save our master, our source file by going file, save as. We're gonna put it in our named folder. So I'm gonna go to desktop, find your named folder, and save it. I'm gonna just save mine here in the Melon Man folder called Melon Man 2023. Okay, I'm going to save that, making sure it is a Photoshop document. Okay, hit save, hit OK. And then if I want to save for my website, I can just hit C on my keyboard or select the crop tool and drag this edge in to crop my artboard down and hit checkbox. And then I can go File, Save a Copy. And I'm going to select from JPEG, from the dropdown, choose JPEG, and we can just get rid of that word copy and just call it Melon Man. Hit save. Okay, whatever quality you want, you can probably go with 8 or 9. Okay, we'll go with 8. Hit OK, and you're done. Okay, that's going to go up on your website, and you're going to write a quick written description explaining all of the tools and concepts you learned in this lesson. All right, best of luck with that.